I wasn't supposed to miss that flight. In fact, if everything had gone according to plan, I would have been sitting by the window, somewhere over the Atlantic, watching the clouds drift beneath me. Instead, I was standing in Terminal 4 at JFK Airport, holding an old man's shaking hand while my boarding gate disappeared from the departure screen. People still ask me why I made that choice. Some think I was foolish. Others say I was lucky. But if you had been standing where I was that morning, I'm not sure you would have walked away either. My name is Daniel. When this happened, I was 28 years old, and I had exactly one chance to change my life. I had spent 3 years working as a junior software engineer in Boston. The job paid the bills, but it wasn't where I wanted to stay forever. Like many people in their 20s, I kept telling myself that my real opportunity was still out there somewhere. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I received an email that made my hands shake. A technology company in London had invited me for the final stage of their hiring process. Not another online interview, not another coding test. They wanted me there in person. The position came with a salary I had never imagined earning. Better projects, better mentors, a chance to work with people.
I read the email 5 times before I finally believed it. The interview was scheduled for Monday morning. The company even suggested arriving 2 days early to recover from jet lag. I booked the earliest flight I could afford. For weeks, my entire life revolved around preparing. I practiced interview questions while cooking dinner. I listened to English podcasts during my commute. I even recorded myself answering common questions because I hated how nervous I sounded. Sometimes I would stop the recording after only 30 seconds. No, that's not clear. I would delete it and start again, and again. Slowly, I became more confident. Not perfect, just better. My mother called every Sunday. "So," she asked one evening, "are you ready?" "I don't know if anyone is ever ready." She laughed softly. "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." She always knew how to calm me down. The night before my flight, I barely slept. Every possible disaster found its way into my mind. What if my luggage got lost? What if immigration asked difficult questions? What if I froze during the interview? Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep. I made coffee, checked my passport for what must have been the 20th time, opened my backpack, closed it, opened it again. Passport, laptop, interview documents, chargers, wallet, everything was there. By 6:30, I was already in a taxi heading toward the airport. The driver noticed how often I looked at my watch. "Big trip?" "The biggest one of my life." He smiled through the rearview mirror. "Then stop worrying. Airports already have enough nervous people." I laughed. For a few minutes, I actually relaxed. JFK was exactly what you'd expect on a busy Friday morning. Rolling suitcases, coffee cups, families trying to stay together, business travelers walking so fast they looked late even when they probably weren't. Announcements echoed through the terminal every few minutes. I checked in without any problems. Security took longer than expected, but nothing unusual. By 9 o'clock, I was finally inside the departure area. Boarding wouldn't begin for another 45 minutes. Perfect. I bought a coffee and found an empty seat near the large windows facing the runway. Planes came and went with perfect rhythm. Every departure felt like someone beginning a completely different chapter of life. I wondered if mine was about to begin too. My phone buzzed. It was my best friend, Alex. "Already at the airport?" "Yeah." "Nervous?" "A little." "That's a good sign." "I've heard that one before." "Listen," he said. "Whatever happens in London, don't try to be someone else. They invited you because they liked the person you already are." I stared out at a plane slowly pushing back from its gate. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had spent too much time trying to sound impressive instead of simply being honest. "I needed to hear that," I said. "You've got this." After we hung up, I noticed something strange. About 20 feet away, near one of the charging stations, an elderly man was standing completely still. Everyone else around him seemed to be moving. He wasn't. He looked around slowly, as if every sign in the airport had suddenly changed into a language he couldn't understand. His suitcase had tipped onto its side. A boarding pass slipped from his hand and floated quietly across the floor. People walked around it. No one stopped. The man bent down to pick it up. Halfway there, he froze. One hand reached toward a nearby chair, the other pressed against his chest. For just a second, I thought he was only tired. Then I saw the fear on his face. And something inside me whispered, "This isn't normal." I stood up without even realizing I had made the decision. My coffee was still warm on the table behind me as I started walking toward him. I had no idea that those next few steps would cost me the flight I had spent months preparing for. "Sir, are you okay?" He looked at me, but it took him a second to answer. I think so." The words came out slowly, too slowly. His breathing sounded uneven, and his hand was still pressed against the left side of his chest. I moved closer. "Can you sit down?" He nodded once. I grabbed the handle of his suitcase with one hand and gently supported his arm with the other. We only walked a few steps before he lowered himself into a chair. His face had turned pale. Around us, the airport continued exactly as before. People hurried to their gates. Children laughed. A boarding announcement echoed across the terminal. No one seemed to notice what was happening just a few feet away. "Can I call someone for you?" He swallowed. "My daughter." He stopped, then shook his head. "I can't find my phone." I looked around the floor. Nothing. Maybe it had fallen somewhere else. "What's your name?" I asked. "Arthur." "I'm Daniel." He managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Daniel." I crouched beside him. "Arthur, I'm going to call airport medical staff, okay?" He hesitated. No hospitals." "I know, but let's make sure you're okay first." His eyes closed for a moment. "I don't want to miss my flight." That sentence caught me off guard. Even now, when he was clearly struggling, he was worried about boarding. I understood that feeling better than he could have known. "I promise," I said calmly. "Let's worry about your health first." I pulled out my phone and dialed the airport assistance number printed on a nearby information sign. The operator answered almost immediately. "This is JFK Medical Response. What's your emergency?" I explained everything as clearly as I could. An elderly passenger, chest discomfort, difficulty breathing, conscious, near gate B24. "They're on the way," the operator said. "Please stay with him." I ended the call and looked back at Arthur. He seemed embarrassed. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize." "I've caused trouble." "No, you haven't." He looked at the floor. "I hate asking people for help." I smiled gently. I think most of us do. For the first time, he let out a small laugh. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough to tell me he was still fighting. A woman sitting nearby finally noticed us. "Is everything all right?" "Medical staff are coming," I replied. She nodded and quietly offered Arthur a bottle of water. He took one small sip. Within 3 minutes, 2 airport paramedics arrived with a medical bag and portable monitor. One knelt beside Arthur. "I'm Mike. Can you tell me what you're feeling?" "A little pressure." "When did it start?" "A few minutes ago." As they worked, I stepped back. I thought my part was over. One of the paramedics looked up. "Sir," he pointed at me. "Did you witness the beginning?" "Yes." "Please stay for a moment." So I stayed. They checked Arthur's blood pressure, attached small sensors to his chest, asked him several questions. His breathing slowly became more regular. The pressure seemed to ease. One paramedic spoke quietly to the other. "I don't think this is a heart attack, but we should still have him evaluated." Arthur immediately shook his head. "No hospital." Mike remained calm. "Mr. Collins, we're not forcing you, but we'd strongly recommend further examination." Collins. Now I knew his last name. Arthur Collins. He sighed deeply. "I have to get to London." I blinked. London? "So do I," I said without thinking. Arthur looked surprised. "You too?" I nodded. "My flight leaves in," I checked my watch, 32 minutes. "About half an hour." He looked at me for a long moment, then quietly said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "You stopped because of me." I shrugged. Anyone would have. Neither of us believed that, because dozens of people had walked past before I arrived. Mike interrupted gently. "Mr. Collins, do you have family traveling with you?" "No." "Anyone meeting you in London?" "My daughter." "Can we call her?" Arthur's face fell. "My phone is gone." The words hung in the air. Lost phone, no family nearby. An elderly man traveling alone. It suddenly felt much more complicated than helping someone sit down. One of the paramedics turned to me again. "Daniel, right?" "Yeah." "Did you happen to notice where he came from?" I thought back. The charging station, the boarding pass, the suitcase. "I think he was near those seats." We walked over together. His suitcase was still there, so was the charging cable, but there was no phone. The paramedic searched under nearby chairs. Nothing. A cleaner joined us, then a security officer. Still nothing. The officer frowned. "If he dropped it earlier in the terminal, it could already be at Lost and Found." Arthur quietly watched from his chair. He suddenly looked older than before. Not because of the chest pain, because of the uncertainty. Without his phone, he didn't know his daughter's number. He couldn't contact her if he landed late. He didn't even remember the exact address where she lived in London. "It was all in my phone," he whispered. I looked toward the departure screen. "London, boarding now." The words hit me harder than I expected. A calm voice filled the terminal. "Passengers traveling to London on flight BA178, boarding has now begun." I looked at Arthur, then at my gate, then back at Arthur. For the first time that morning, I realized I might have to choose between the opportunity I'd spent years chasing and a man who suddenly had no one else. I wish I could tell you the decision was easy. It wasn't. In fact, I hated that I even had to make one. I looked toward gate B27. People were already lining up in neat rows, passports and boarding passes in their hands. Some were chatting, some were wearing headphones. A few were typing on laptops as if boarding an international flight was just another part of their workday. For them, everything was normal. For me, time had suddenly become very expensive. I checked my watch again. 27 minutes. That was enough to board if I left now. Probably. But probably didn't feel as comforting as it usually did. Mike, the paramedic, finished speaking with Arthur and walked over to me. "His vital signs are more stable now." "That's good." "It is," he paused. "But he's still confused and he shouldn't continue this trip alone." I nodded. "I understand. We're trying to locate his phone and contact his family." "So someone will stay with him?" "Of course." His answer should have made the decision easier. Instead, it made me notice something else. Arthur wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the departure board. Not because of his flight, because he looked completely lost. The kind of lost that has nothing to do with directions. I walked back to him. "Arthur?" He looked up slowly. "I don't remember my daughter's number." "You don't have to. We only spoke through messages." His voice cracked. "I told her I'd be there today." There was a long silence. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded envelope. The paper looked old, as if he had carried it for weeks. I was going to give this to her. I didn't mean to look, but he unfolded it slightly, and I noticed a handwritten sentence near the top. I'm sorry I stayed away for so long. He quickly folded it again. I haven't seen her in 11 years. I blinked. 11 years. He noticed the surprise on my face. We argued. He smiled sadly. It seems silly now. What happened? I thought I was protecting my pride. He looked at the envelope. I was only protecting my loneliness. I didn't know what to say. Some stories don't need advice. They just need someone willing to hear them. My wife passed away 3 years ago, he continued. Before she died, he stopped for a moment. She made me promise I'd fix things. His fingers tightened around the envelope. I waited too long. I looked toward my gate again. Another announcement echoed across the terminal. Final boarding groups are now invited to proceed. Every announcement sounded louder than the last. My phone vibrated. Alex. I answered immediately. How's it going? He asked. I looked at Arthur before answering. It's complicated. What happened? I stepped a few feet away and explained everything as quickly as I could. There was silence on the other end. Finally, Alex asked, So, what's the problem? The problem? Yeah. You already helped him. I know. Medical staff are there. I know. So why do you still sound like you're standing there? Because I couldn't explain what I was feeling. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was something much stranger. It felt wrong to leave. Not because Arthur would be unsafe. He wouldn't. The paramedics were professionals. Airport security was helping. He wasn't alone anymore. But everyone around him was doing a job. No one actually knew him. No one knew he had spent 11 years carrying that letter. No one knew he was terrified of arriving too late to ask his daughter for forgiveness. I lowered my voice. What if she thinks he never came? Alex didn't answer immediately. Then he asked one question. If that were your dad, I closed my eyes. Would you want a stranger to stay? I didn't answer, because I already knew. Daniel, Alex said gently, only you can decide. The call ended. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. My heartbeat felt louder than the airport announcements. I walked toward my gate, one step, then another, then another. I reached the entrance. Passengers were handing over their boarding passes. A gate agent smiled politely. Passport, please. I reached into my backpack. My fingers touched my passport. I could still do this. I could board. I could make the interview. I could change my future. Behind me, I heard Arthur cough. It wasn't loud. Most people probably didn't even notice. But I did. I turned around. He was still sitting exactly where I had left him, holding that folded letter, looking smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally, like a man carrying years of regret all by himself. The gate agent looked at me again. Sir? I stared at the passport in my hand, then at Arthur, then back at the gate. For a few seconds, the airport disappeared. No announcements, no conversations, no rolling suitcases. Just one question. What kind of person do I want to be when I look back on this day? I slowly slid my passport back into my backpack. The gate agent frowned. Sir, are you boarding? I took a slow breath. No. Her eyebrows lifted. I'm sorry? I looked past her, toward the aircraft that had occupied my thoughts for months. Then I smiled, a small, uncertain smile. I'm not getting on that flight. The gate agent stared at me, clearly surprised. Are you sure? I nodded. Yes. For the first time all morning, I stopped running after my future and walked back toward a stranger whose past wasn't finished yet. I had no idea what it would cost me or what it would eventually give me. Arthur looked up as I approached. For a moment, he seemed confused. "I thought," he said quietly, "I thought your flight was boarding." "It is." "And you're still here." I pulled a chair beside him. "I know." He studied my face, almost as if he expected me to stand up again at any second. "You'll miss it." "I probably will." His eyes dropped to the floor. "You shouldn't do that because of me." I smiled. "I'm not doing it because of you." He looked puzzled. "I'm doing it because I don't think I'd be proud of myself if I left." For the first time since we'd met, I saw his eyes fill with tears. He looked away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm too old to cry in airports." I laughed softly. "I don't think airports have an age limit for that." Even Mike, the paramedic, smiled. A few minutes later, the security officer returned. Still no phone. "I'm sorry," she said. "We've checked the nearby gates and the charging station. Nothing has been turned in." Arthur let out a slow breath. "I suppose someone found it." "It may still show up," she replied kindly. "We'll keep looking." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe it. Mike looked at me. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If you're not traveling now, would you mind staying with Mr. Collins while we arrange transportation to the airport medical clinic?" "Of course." Arthur interrupted immediately. "No clinic." Mike stayed patient. "We only want to make sure you're safe before making any travel plans." "I'm fine." "You felt chest pain. It is past. That doesn't always mean the problem is past." Arthur sighed. "I've already disappointed enough people." Those words stayed with me, not because they were dramatic, because they sounded practiced, like he'd been saying them to himself for years. About 20 minutes later, after another examination, Arthur finally agreed to visit the airport clinic. Only one condition. "I don't want an ambulance." Mike nodded. "We can arrange a wheelchair." Arthur looked embarrassed again. "I can still walk." "I know," Mike said gently. "But today you don't have to prove it." Arthur didn't argue. As an airport employee brought over the wheelchair, Arthur leaned toward me. "I've spent my whole life refusing help." He gave a tired smile. "Turns out that's an exhausting hobby." I chuckled. "It sounds expensive, too." "It is." He carefully sat down. As we started toward the clinic, the departure board changed behind us. My flight disappeared. Just like that. No dramatic music, no announcement telling me I'd made the wrong decision. The flight simply vanished from the screen. It had left without me. I expected to feel panic. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The airport clinic was quieter than the main terminal. A nurse checked Arthur's blood pressure again while another staff member asked him routine questions. Date of birth, medical history, emergency contact, medication. Then came the question none of us wanted. "Who can we contact for you?" Arthur looked at me helplessly. "I don't know her number." The nurse hesitated. "Do you remember her full name?" "Emily Collins." "City?" "London." "Address?" Arthur closed his eyes. "I remember the street, but not the house number." The nurse typed for a few moments before shaking her head. "We'll keep trying." She left the room. Arthur stared at the white hospital blanket folded beside the examination bed. "I've made quite a mess of today." "You had a medical emergency?" "No." He smiled sadly. "I mean the last 11 years. I didn't interrupt. "When Emily was 22, she wanted to move to England." He folded his hands together. I thought she was making a mistake. So I told her. Many times. He laughed quietly. I confused control with love. He paused. When she left, anyway, I stopped calling. She stopped calling too. We both waited for the other person to apologize. Another long silence. My wife kept telling me. He looked toward the window. Arthur, one day you'll run out of tomorrows. He swallowed. She was right. I wasn't thinking about London anymore. I was thinking about my own parents, about the arguments we'd had over small things, about how easy it is to believe there will always be another chance to make things right. A knock interrupted us. The nurse returned. We found something. Arthur straightened immediately. My phone? She smiled. No. But airport security located the airline you were flying with. Hope flickered across Arthur's face. We're trying to contact your daughter using the emergency information attached to your reservation. Arthur gripped the arms of the chair. They can do that? Sometimes. It depends on the airline and privacy rules. So we're waiting for a response. Waiting. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Minutes stretched into half an hour, then another. I checked my email. There it was, a message from the London company. Subject, interview reminder. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Eventually, I did. The message was polite. They were looking forward to meeting me Monday morning. They wished me a safe journey. I read those two words again. Safe journey. I let out a quiet breath. That journey wasn't happening anymore. At least, not today. I closed the email before I could think about it too much. Arthur noticed. Was that your interview? Yeah. I'm sorry. You've apologized enough. No. He looked directly at me. This one matters. If you hadn't stopped, you'd already be halfway to London. I shrugged, trying to make it sound smaller than it felt. Maybe. He shook his head. I hope one day you don't regret this. Before I could answer, the nurse hurried back into the room. Her expression had completely changed. She was smiling. Mr. Collins, she held up a small notepad. I think we've found your daughter. Arthur slowly stood, his hands trembling. What did she say? The nurse took a careful breath. She said... Then she stopped. Someone behind her called her name from the hallway. It's urgent, another nurse said. Can you come for a moment? She looked at us apologetically. I'll be right back. She disappeared before finishing the sentence. Arthur and I looked at each other. Neither of us spoke. We were only a few words away from knowing whether 11 years of silence were about to end, or whether we had arrived too late. The room felt impossibly quiet. Arthur kept staring at the empty doorway. His hands rested on the arms of the chair, but his fingers wouldn't stop moving. Tap, tap, tap. He wasn't impatient. He was afraid. I had never met his daughter, but somehow I already understood the weight of the next few minutes. Would she answer? Would she come? Would she even want to see him? After 11 years, there were no easy answers. A few minutes later, the nurse returned. I'm sorry, she said. That emergency couldn't wait. Arthur stood before she had even finished speaking. My daughter, the nurse smiled. We spoke to her. Arthur didn't breathe. For a second, neither did I. She was surprised. I imagined she would be, Arthur whispered. But she stayed on the phone. His eyes searched the nurse's face. What did she say? The nurse glanced down at her notes. She asked one question. Arthur's voice became almost silent. What was it? Is my dad okay? Arthur closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his cheek. Not because she had forgiven him, Not because everything was fixed. Because after 11 years, that was the first thing she asked. Not, why is he calling? Not, what does he want? Just, is my dad okay? The nurse continued. I told her you were stable. Arthur nodded slowly. Thank you. She lives about 45 minutes from Heathrow. His shoulders lifted with hope. She said she'll come. For the first time all day, Arthur looked like a man who could finally breathe. Then the nurse added something else. She also said, Arthur looked up. She thought you weren't coming. His smile disappeared. She waited at the airport this morning. Neither of us spoke. She had checked the arrival board several times. Arthur covered his face with one hand. I was late. The nurse shook her head gently. No. You were having a medical emergency. But she didn't know that. Arthur whispered those words to himself more than to anyone else. For years, he had feared that one day he would arrive too late. Now he learned that, for a little while at least, he already had. The nurse handed him a phone. It's Emily. Arthur stared at it. He didn't reach for it. His hand stayed frozen in the air. Mr. Collins? He looked at me. What if she hangs up? I smiled. Then you'll know you tried. What if she doesn't forgive me? You can't control that. He swallowed. But you can tell her the truth. Arthur nodded once, then slowly accepted the phone. He held it against his ear. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Finally, hello? His voice barely existed. Another long silence. Then I heard him laugh softly through his tears. No, I'm the one who should say sorry. I looked away. That conversation didn't belong to me. I walked into the hallway and sat beside a vending machine. People came and went. Doctors, airport staff, travelers with minor injuries. Life kept moving. I wondered whether my own life had just stopped. My phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Alex. It was an email notification. From Harper & Miles Technology. I stared at the sender's name. Part of me didn't want to open it. Maybe they were canceling. Maybe they had already decided to interview someone else. I finally tapped the screen. The message was short. Dear Daniel, we noticed that you haven't checked in for your flight based on the travel details you shared with us. We hope everything is all right. If you've experienced an emergency or unexpected circumstances, please let us know as soon as you're able. I read it twice, then a third time. They hadn't rejected me. Not yet. I looked back toward Arthur's room. He was still talking, still crying, still smiling. Without thinking too much, I opened a reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. How could I explain this? Would they even believe me? I missed my international flight because I stayed with a stranger. It sounded ridiculous, even to me. I deleted the sentence, started again, deleted it again. Eventually, I decided there was only one thing to do. Tell the truth. No exaggeration, no emotional language, just the facts. I explained that an elderly passenger had experienced what appeared to be a medical emergency, that I had stayed until airport medical staff arrived, that later, because he was traveling alone and had lost his phone, I remained to help him contact his family. I apologized for missing the interview. I thanked them for the opportunity. And I ended with one sentence. I understand completely if this means the opportunity is no longer available. I pressed send. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen. There was nothing else I could do. About 10 minutes later, Arthur stepped into the hallway. His eyes were red, but he looked lighter, as if someone had quietly removed a backpack he had been carrying for years. She asked if I still take sugar in my tea. I smiled. What? He laughed. The first thing she said after we both stopped crying. He shook his head in disbelief. She remembered. He sat beside me. We talked for 23 minutes. That's a good start. He nodded. It is. Then he looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Gratitude. Real gratitude. Not the kind people say automatically. The kind that leaves them searching for words. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Yes. He reached into his jacket pocket. Carefully, he unfolded the letter again. Then, very slowly, he tore it in half. I stared at him. I don't understand. He smiled. I don't need this anymore. He held up the torn pages. I thought I'd have to explain 11 years with paper. He looked toward the phone in his hand. But today, we finally used our voices. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another email, same sender, Harper and Miles Technology. I took a slow breath before opening it. The first line made my heart race. Daniel, thank you for your honest message. For a few seconds, I couldn't make myself scroll. Arthur noticed. Good news? I don't know yet. Read it. My thumb moved slowly across the screen. The email wasn't long. It began with something I hadn't expected. Daniel, thank you for your honest message. Then another sentence. We were sorry to hear about the situation at the airport, and we're glad the passenger received help. I kept reading. We believe technical skills are important. Character is harder to teach. I stopped, read that sentence again. Then I looked at Arthur. He had no idea what the email said, but he could tell something had changed. I continued reading. If you're still interested in joining Harper and Miles, we'd like to offer you two options. Option 1, reschedule the interview for next month. Option 2, complete the final interview online next week due to the exceptional circumstances. I blinked, twice. There was one final sentence. Please let us know which option you prefer. We look forward to speaking with you. I lowered the phone. For the first time that day, I laughed. Not loudly, just enough to let all the tension escape. Arthur smiled. I'll take that as good news. It is. I handed in the phone. He adjusted his glasses and read the email himself. When he reached the sentence about character, he looked up. They're right. I'm not sure. I am. He handed the phone back. You didn't help me because someone was watching. You didn't expect a reward. You simply chose not to walk away. He leaned back in his chair. Those are the people every company hopes to hire. I didn't know if he was right. Maybe they were just being kind. Maybe I had been lucky. Maybe both. An airport staff member approached us. Mr. Collins? Yes? We've spoken with the airline. Arthur listened carefully. They've arranged a seat for tomorrow's flight at no additional cost, given today's medical situation. His shoulders relaxed. Thank you. And your daughter has already confirmed she'll meet you at Heathrow. The staff member smiled. I think she'll be very happy to see you. Arthur nodded, unable to speak. After the staff member left, he looked at me. I almost didn't make this trip. What changed your mind? He took a deep breath. My wife. He smiled at the memory. 3 days before she passed away, she asked me one question. He paused. Arthur, when I'm gone, who will you have? He looked out the clinic window. I couldn't answer. I realized I'd spent years winning arguments and losing people. Neither of us spoke for a while. Sometimes silence says exactly what needs to be said. Around 2 hours later, Arthur was discharged. The doctors believed the chest pain had most likely been caused by severe stress combined with exhaustion. They still recommended follow-up tests once he reached London. He promised he would go. This time, I believed him. We walked slowly back toward the main terminal. The afternoon rush had replaced the morning crowd. Different faces, different flights, different destinations. It felt strange, as if an entire day had passed inside a small room while the rest of the world kept moving. Near the exit, Arthur stopped. "So," I smiled. "So, I suppose this is goodbye." "I suppose it is." He reached out his hand. Instead of shaking it, I hugged him. For a second, he seemed surprised. Then he hugged me back. It wasn't the hug of two old friends. It was the hug of two strangers whose lives had crossed at exactly the right moment. When we stepped apart, he reached into his wallet. "Oh, no." I already knew what he was thinking. "No." "Please." "No." "I insist." "I can't." He sighed dramatically. "You're making this difficult." "I learned from you." That made him laugh. Then he quietly slipped a small business card into my shirt pocket. "At least keep this." I looked at it. There was only a name, Arthur Collins, and beneath it, a London address. "No phone number?" I asked. He smiled. "I'll have one again tomorrow." We both laughed. As we walked toward the airport exit, he suddenly stopped one last time. "Daniel." "Yeah?" I spent 11 years believing that asking for help made me weak. He looked around the busy terminal. But today, a stranger reminded me that accepting kindness takes courage too. I watched him leave with an airport assistant. His pace was slow, but his shoulders were straighter than when I first saw him. The envelope was gone. The letter was gone. Only hope remained. I stood there for another minute before calling a taxi home. For the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about the interview. I was thinking about how close we all come to walking past someone's hardest moment without ever realizing it. 3 days later, my laptop sat open on my kitchen table. Clean shirt, fresh notebook, glass of water beside me. My online interview was about to begin. I clicked Join Meeting. The screen connected. 3 interviewers smiled politely. One of them said, "Daniel, before we discuss software," he smiled, "we'd like to hear the story behind your missed flight." I smiled too. It wasn't on my resume, it wasn't a technical skill, but somehow, it had become the most important answer I would ever give. Sometimes the biggest opportunity in your life doesn't arrive because you chased it. Sometimes, it arrives because you stopped long enough to help someone else reach theirs.